Hi there. Have you been confused by all the information that is available about nutrition? Have you ever thought to yourself, I want to be healthy, but I don't know how in this crazy world? If so, you're in the right place to learn everything you need to know about how you can be your healthiest self by improving your digestion. We'll learn how to make the easiest and healthiest sourdough bread to the truth about yeast and sugar. Join me each week and we'll talk about everything from junk food to your protein needs. We will even dive into some unspoken topics like, what is my bowel movement trying to tell me? Or how can my emotions possibly affect my digestion? For more information on how to be your healthiest self, visit us on healthyselfwithfood.com, where we provide resources including recipes, cooking classes, and coaching appointments. I believe to completely take care of your whole self, that it includes what you put on your body. So I'm very happy to introduce you to our amazing sponsor, Gervine Family Farms, where you can find the best smelling soaps and healing body products on the market. Gervine Family Farms is the home of all natural, real soap and body products that truly heal your skin. Do you regret washing your hands because after you do, your skin is dry and irritated? If so, try the healthiest soap on earth. It is made from coconut oil, essential oil for the smell, and herbs or spices for the soap color. All the ingredients are so healthy for your skin that you could eat them, but please don't eat the soap. It doesn't taste good. There are no fillers, synthetic dyes, fragrances, or low-quality oils. Real soap doesn't strip your skin of all your body's natural oils, thus requiring you to use lotion so that your skin doesn't completely dry out. Save money on lotion by using real soap, and you will never be able to go back to your fake beauty bars that you call soap. Find us at GervineFamilyFarms.com. That is GURVINE FamilyFarms.com. My name is Kaisa. I've always been intrigued about being my healthiest self, even from a very young age. I have been continually studying and testing out all sorts of health options throughout my life. I'm thrilled to be a certified health, life, spiritual, and soul purpose coach, and for the last 10 years, I have enjoyed working as a nutritional counselor in a naturopathic doctor's office. As a nutritional counselor, I guide patients through protocols for their particular health ailment prescribed by their doctor. I also have almost 30 years of experience in making healing food for my 6 children, husband, and friends. This doesn't mean that my food always turned out or tasted good, but they sure were good sports as I learned many tricks and tips that I now can share with you in your food journey. I recently discovered Ayurveda, and I am currently studying to become a digestive specialist. Ayurveda is the knowledge of life. The basic principle of Ayurveda is to prevent and treat illness by maintaining balance in the body. Let's dive into today's topic. Hi, and welcome to today's topic, which is guidelines for a healthy diet. So sometimes when I'm talking to a group, especially if it's like a group of kids and we're talking about, how to be healthy, I'll ask them something like, who knows what you put in your car to make it run? And they'll, give answers, gasoline, fuel. What if you put soda pop instead of gasoline? What do you think would happen? And they'll give some fun answers about how it might not run as well or not start at all. So I like to use this analogy because imagine that your body is like a car. What kind of fuel do you think your body needs? And do you think sometimes we put in the wrong fuel? Now, I'm sure you might say, well, yeah, of course, sometimes we do make, the wrong choices on food. But I thought it would be really neat to break down what exactly are the components of what it is that our body needs to be healthy or to run properly, to be strong. And sometimes I think we have a misconceived notion on what this is. Like it has to be food that doesn't taste good, food that's expensive, and we have all these beliefs around how it could be really hard. It's not going to taste good. Why should I do it? But there's so much more to food and us having a connection to the food. So for today, we're just going to break down what nutrients are. And we all want to eat healthy foods, but do we know what nutrients are needed and in what amounts? So first, let's break down what are nutrients. Now, nutrients are the substances in food that our bodies process to enable it to function. And that tells me that we can't live without these particular nutrients. So we're going to go over what the 6 nutrients are. But if nutrients are the substances that our body needs to enable it to function, that means if it doesn't get those nutrients in the right quantities and amount, things are going to break down. Things are going to stop working properly. And I believe that is where we get dysfunction in our health, whether it be disease or just, inflammation on the way to disease. But if our body's getting all the nutrients it needs, it will not have the typical problems that we see. I believe those are a nutrient deficiency. Many, many things that we are seeing rise in popularity, meaning that just more people are having these issues in their lives, is from nutrient deficiency. It is not from a deficiency in pharmaceuticals. It is not from a deficiency in processed foods or, that type of thing. It's obviously from the nutrients. So everyone needs the same nutrients from their food. So the things that we get from our food are vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And the last one of the nutrients is water. So nutrients can be broken into 2 categories. You got your macronutrients, which are your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats, which you've heard of this when you're thinking about food and you want to know, well, is this food that I'm eating a carbohydrate or is it a protein or is it a fat? If that's something you've ever looked at, thought about, or heard, there's a reason for that. So macronutrients make up the majority of our diets and provide energy for us to move and function. So it's a really important part of how our food is made up, but it's not the only thing, because you can have a food that is a carbohydrate, but it has none of the other nutrients, which we're going to talk about in a minute, called micronutrients, which is our vitamins and minerals. And so you're getting the energy, but you're not getting any vitamins and minerals. And those are very important. And the same thing goes for proteins and fats. They're not all created the same just because they fall into that macronutrient category. So the next category is micronutrients. And those, like I said, are your vitamins and minerals, such as calcium, iron, and vitamin C. Micronutrients are chemical substances that we require in small amounts for healthy growth and development. So now let's talk about what are nutrient-dense foods, because I gave you the example of eating a food that's a carbohydrate, but yet it wasn't nutrient-dense because it didn't have any vitamins and minerals. So what does a nutrient-dense food look like? Foods that are packed with nutrients. So they're going to have limited or no sugar. They're not going to have saturated fat. And although salt can be a conversation, that's typically referring to processed foods and things that they're adding the salt. Sometimes, like even in the canning process, they're adding more salt than you and I probably need to eat on a regular basis because it disintegrates or kind of dissipates out of that food so you don't taste it. So they had to add more than they would otherwise. So in that case, it's always better to salt your food as you eat it. Salt is not dangerous, and we'll talk more about that. There are different kinds of salts, and salts with vitamins and minerals in it is going to be the kind of salt that you want to use rather than a salt that is not nutrient dense. So even with the salt, we can use that same philosophy. Okay, so focusing on nutrient-dense foods helps us to get the nutrients we need while limiting overall calories. And we're not going to have a big conversation today on calories because that is very personal for each person. Not everyone's going to need the same amount of calories, and sometimes focusing on something like that can get you off track. Because if you're eating nutrient dense food, whole food, real food, all these different words that we have for it, you really may not need to worry about calories if you're eating meals that are in a size that is satisfying, but you're not stuffing yourself, or you're not skipping a lot of meals to where you're getting really, really hungry and then you're eating too much in a meal. There's all these different factors. So now let's talk about what are nutrient poor foods. And nowadays there are many nutrient poor foods available, unfortunately. And this means that they don't contain much nutrition that your body needs to function. Instead, the food is full of excess energy, which we typically will find in the form of sugar or a simple carbohydrate. So instead of being a complex carbohydrate where it's going to have the fiber and some of these other nutrients that we're going to talk about, you can eat a food that has a lot of energy in it because it's just a processed, refined food that just gives you like a burst of energy. But it's not nutritional. This excess energy means that the food will provide your body with kilojoules, which is the energy source, and often that translates into calories, but it is void of other essential nutrients that your body needs to function. So let's consider some of these nutrient-dense foods. For protein, you can choose seafood or lean meats and poultry, eggs, beans, peas, soy products. We want to make sure those are organic and non-GMO, and unsalted nuts and seeds. Fruits, you can eat a variety of fresh, canned, frozen, or dried fruits. And we want to look for canned fruit that says it's light or packed in its own juice. And that's what I prefer to look for. Sometimes if you can't find the packed in its own juice, light is the only way you can go because it just means it has less sugar. But it's really great when it's packed in its own juice or another fruit juice, but that way it's juice and not added sugar. And keep in mind that 1/4 cup of dried fruit counts as 1 serving of fruit. Vegetables, I'm sure have had conversations about vegetables. Eat your vegetables. And a lot of times I think people get turned off by how to eat vegetables, or why do I have to eat vegetables, or that's what my parents always said. But vegetables are really important. And so if we can find ways to eat these in a way that we really, enjoy them and they're satisfying, then we can really learn to love them. You want to serve a variety of fresh, canned, frozen, or dried vegetables. Choose peas or beans along with colorful vegetables each week. It's good to have a variety. When selecting canned or frozen vegetables, look for ones that are lower in sodium. And again, this goes back to what I was saying about the salt being added. It's not that salt's bad, but what's even better is if you add your own salt, because maybe you have pink Himalayan or real salt or something on hand at home that's better than the iodized salt that they may, or the table salt that they may have just been adding to that canned food. So if you get it unsalted, knowing that's unsalted, you can salt it as you're making your meal. For grains, choose whole grains such as whole wheat bread or pasta, oatmeal, popcorn, quinoa, or brown or wild rice. And in dairy is something that not everybody can necessarily handle. And there's, again, nothing inherently bad with dairy, but often people's bodies don't process it well. And I believe that often that has something to do with how dairy is processed, or, like how the animals are grown, or the chemicals or whatever they're, pumping it with or doing to it is more of what our bodies are reacting to. And so if you are able to drink or eat dairy products, such as milk, yogurt, and cheese, you can go for the low-fat ones. You don't necessarily have to. Again, that's a conversation for per person, just like the calorie one was. So I don't want to put out like a blanket statement about it. But there can be good brands or qualities of this type of food that you can find. Maybe you have to go to a health food store. Maybe you can still find some in your store on the health food aisle. There's always options. So you just have to decide if dairy is something that you are personally partaking of, or your family. And if not, also know, just a side note, that you can totally function without something like dairy. Our family's been doing it for years, and although the first thing that a person misses is cheese, because there's not really a great replacement for it. They're coming out with better ones, but cheese is just an amazing food as far as melting and creamy and delicious. But we chose at first to do it just based on the quality and the way that things were being produced, and didn't feel good about it. And then come to find out that our family had sensitivities to it. And so the transition was made a little bit easier because we had already been, kind of doing it by choice. And then there's also fortified soy beverages, and they count as dairy. Obviously, there's a lot of other dairy replacement milks and cheeses and butters and all these kinds of things that you can get. That's another day's conversation as well. I just don't want to leave those out. But we do want to aim to limit our calories from added sugar. Naturally occurring sugars, such as those in fruit and milk, aren't added sugars. So examples of added sugars include, seeing things on the label that say brown sugar or corn sweetener or corn syrup and white sugar. To avoid added sugar, check nutrition labels. So it's really good to learn to read, labels. Avoid sodas and other drinks with added sugars. Limit juice servings. So like if your child drinks juice, make sure it's 100% juice without added sugars. So we also want to limit our calories from saturated fats. And saturated fats mainly come from animal sources of food, such as red meat, hot dogs, poultry, butter, and other full-fat dairy products. Things like pizza, sandwiches, burgers, and burritos are a common source of saturated fat. And desserts, such as cakes and ice creams and are another common source of saturated fat. And when cooking, you want to look for ways to replace saturated fats with vegetable and nut oils, which provide essential fatty acids and vitamin E. And so saturated fats just means that the fat molecule is saturated, right? And so it's harder for our body to break that down, and it doesn't give our body the opportunity to have it bind and break down as easily with other things. And so I know the first things it mentioned was meat, which doesn't mean that you can't eat any meat. Red meat just tends to be a higher source of saturated fats, and then processed things like hot dogs and maybe lunch meats or any other sort of processed foods. But like chicken or something that, if you were to log it into something that kind of counts the macronutrients in your food, it's going to show that it doesn't have any fat, like a chicken breast, or very low. And then cooking oils, again, we will go into this more in detail. We're going to break down everything at some point, but each episode we can only go into each thing so much at this moment. So I promise you later we will talk more about fats and oils, and so that there's more understanding on what we're talking about. But there are some oils that someone could choose to cook with that are saturated, and then there's others that are polysaturated or polyunsaturated or unsaturated. And so again, we'll talk about what those are. Based on the words, you can kind of guess, instead of it being a saturated molecule, now it's unsaturated or partially unsaturated, which means that it has room to bind and to break down with other foods that you eat it with. So it just makes it easier for the body. And okay, so we'll go into that more in the future. The next category to kind of limit our calories on was salt. And I was doing something previously, like I said, with nutrition for kids. And so one of these statistics was that most children in the United States have too much salt in their daily diets. And another name for salt is sodium. And salt can hide in sandwiches, where the sodium in bread, meat, condiments, and toppings adds up. And processed foods such as pizza, pasta dishes, and soup, like canned soups, those kind of things, often have high amounts of salt. So encouraging our children to snack on fruits and vegetables instead of chips and cookies, and checking the nutritional labels and looking for products that are low in sodium is very beneficial. And again, it's not because salt is inherently bad, it's just the type of salt they're using and how some of it goes away, but you still get the sodium in your body, but not necessarily the nutrients, because it kind of disintegrated or went away with time of being packaged. Okay, so there's 6 major nutrients that's needed for healthy nutrition, and we kind of went over what they were. And the number one is water. And there's already a podcast on that, so it goes into more detail about water, what it is, how to drink more of it, how much do we actually need, what are the different ways we can drink it, and what it does, why water is so important for our body. Then the next nutrient. It's carbohydrate, fat, protein, vitamins, and minerals. And we're going to break each one of these down. And each plays a unique and important role in how our bodies function. So water makes up over 50% of our bodies and is important for good health. Water is used in different body processes and helps to regulate our temperature. But more importantly, water helps our body detox. It naturally knows how to detox, but can't do it without the water. It has to have the water to bind to the toxins and carry it out. It also is for our blood, and other body fluids are mostly water. And because they're mostly water, this helps them to carry the nutrients around in the body and in and out of our cells. The amount of water we need each day can vary depending on our age, activity level, etc. But a good rule of thumb is to drink 8 to 10 cups of water a day. I always try to tell people not to get stuck or hung up on, how much, but just to be aware of water and get in the habit of it. Whether it means you have a water bottle with you at all times, and really focusing on drinking in between meals. It's not getting those 8 to 10 glasses in your 3 meals a day. That is too much water with your food. It's okay to have some with your food just to wash it down or, wet your mouth. But the majority of water should be drunk in between meals. A tall glass first thing in the morning when you wake up is a really great thing to do to help get our digestive system going and to encourage our body to want to have its morning bowel movement, which is super healthy for us. And then at night, not too late at night, but ideally if your body is operating at a high balance level, even drinking water right before bed should be okay for your body, and it can hold on and do all its operations, and then you can urinate first thing in the morning when you get up. But I know often there's a belief system, or it seems that the case is if you drink water, after 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock or something, people are like, oh, I got to get up 3 times to urinate. That's actually a sign of something else. Again, we can go into, the details on that in another podcast, but just FYI. It's okay to be drinking water, especially if you're thirsty right before bed, because that's your body telling you that it needs more liquids. A good way to get the water in is also herbal tea, and it can be cooled down and just drinking it like water. It can still be sweetened, just not with sugar itself, but some of the other sweeteners. And I go over that in our herbal tea podcast because then it's like medicine. It's like you're getting the water and the medicine. It's amazing. All right, the next category is carbohydrates. And carbs for short are the main source of energy in our body. And so, sometimes when people are doing diets or trying to lose weight or looking at things, they'll say, carbs are bad. Our body always needs carbs. It just needs a balanced amount. It doesn't need too many, but it's never a good idea to cut any one of the macronutrients or micronutrients, but mostly the macronutrients out of your diet completely, because then you're not getting the things you need. Remember, we said these are the 6 nutrients you need. So if you're cutting one of them out, it's not going to be good. In our body, blood sugar is the fuel that powers our cells. And so carbohydrates can be simple, so they're easy to digest in the form of sugar, or complex, more difficult to digest in the form of starch or fiber. And we're going to go more into this. So a simple carbohydrate, typically these days we would think of something that is something sugary, and maybe something made with something like white flour, because then it's just really simple. It's like literally just sugar, because white flour basically is turned into sugar in your body when it's converted into sugar in your body when you eat it. So there are other foods that are simple carbohydrates that don't have to be this form. But typically, if we just focus on getting complex carbohydrates, and when it says they're more difficult to digest, it's not difficult like later we'll talk about what some foods are that are difficult. It's meaning that it takes more work for the body to break them down. So it classifies it as difficult, but not a difficult food. And it's only more difficult because it has fiber in it, and therefore the body has to work to break it down. And that's a good thing, because then it's a slower release of the energy from the carbohydrate because it broke it down slower. Whereas simple carbohydrates, if you're just taking a shot of sugar, or like a Gatorade or something that just like pops in that sugar to you like really fast, sometimes people that are runners or athletes or will think that that's a good idea to do that because it gives them that burst of energy. And maybe in that case it is. So that's a whole nother conversation. But with those spikes of energy so quick like that, then you have the drop from it as well, which is not a good way to help our body. And we can't actually digest fiber, but it plays an important role in gut health and cholesterol metabolism. So fiber is a part of this carbohydrate conversation, but it's kind of its own thing because you've heard of fiber. Sometimes people even take it separately. But fiber promotes bowel regularity, and it may also reduce the chances of cardiovascular disease and cancer later in life because fiber also lowers the bad cholesterol and controls blood sugar. And again, it controls that blood sugar by it not spiking super quick with that sugar intake that gives you that energy, because the fiber helps slow down the breaking down of that complex carbohydrate, which gives you energy more sustained. So foods that contain high levels of fiber include whole grain cereals, whole grain breads, chickpeas, kidney beans, seeds, and nuts. And those are just some examples. Even a cereal is still a processed and a more broken down thing. I would almost say on this list like whole grains, like eating something that is already just a whole grain. And so, even something like a rice is a whole grain, popcorn is a whole grain. Any sort of, like, I use einkorn a lot as my grain, but there could be any sort of grain that when it's like just the grain right there, and maybe you grind it and use it to make something, then it's a whole grain. Anyways, those are just some examples. And so the dietary guidelines for Americans recommends about 50% of calories in our diet come from carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are found in fruits and vegetables and grains and nuts and seeds and honey and dairy foods. But all those things that I just listed are things that have fiber in them. They have something more to them than just straight sugar, like processed white sugar. Carbohydrates are the most important source of energy. And again, when we're having the conversation about children, then we're saying, well, it helps a child's body use fat and protein for building and repairing tissue. Well, that's the same case with adults as well. But this conversation about how to feed our kids is so important because they're in their growing years and in their formative years, and the more we can get them the right things, those building blocks in their body, the better off they're going to be. But we as adults still need to understand these concepts and know that we need carbohydrates, complex ones, to help our body use fat and protein for building and repairing tissue. We are still doing that if we are being active. I'm sure you've heard things like after 30, your muscle, breaks down or your bones break down. But that's only if you're not doing anything to support your body. Again, that's another day's conversation. It's usually pretty easy to get kids enough carbohydrates. They come in, many different forms, and we talked about like sugars, which is not the one that I obviously want to recommend to anybody, but they also come in the form of starches and fiber. Foods that contain high levels of carbohydrates are things like breads, and I would add something like a whole grain bread, oatmeal, which is a whole grain, cereal, again, eat that sparingly because that is a processed form of food, rice, crackers, again, a processed form of food, pasta, same thing, potatoes. And potatoes have gotten a bad rap, over the years that, they're bad for you because they have carbohydrates in them or, starch or whatever. But you just don't want to overdo it. You want to balance out any of your meals that you're eating and not overdo the potatoes. But potatoes inherently, again, are not a bad food. They're actually quite healthy. Good to get them organic, non-GMO, those types of things, just because of the chemicals and things that can be involved in farming them. But potatoes are fabulous. The next category is protein. And protein is made of amino acids, which are the building blocks of our tissues. Protein in our diet is used for growth, repair, and maintenance of body tissue. Meat, dairy, poultry, seafood, beans, peas, nuts, seeds, and dairy foods are the best sources of protein. There are lots of ways to get protein in our diet. There's a lot of foods that have protein. Some foods obviously don't have as much as others. And so if there are people that, don't eat meat or don't eat dairy, there are still ways to get protein. Obviously, there's limits. So someone's going to have to either eat seafood or eat beans or eat peas or eat nuts or eat seeds, like one of those categories. But there's ways to get enough protein. And protein is super important to have in every single meal, every single day of our life, because our body always needs protein and it doesn't store it or hold on to it. And so we need to get it in every meal if possible. And protein is an important nutrient that provides the essential amino acids that help children grow. And I'm saying that because they're the ones that are growing. Obviously, we still need it as adults as well, but it helps them grow and develop properly. And protein is a part of every cell in the body and helps to build and repair muscle, tissue, skin, nails, and hair. Protein also helps to build hormones, enzymes, and a healthy immune system. Protein helps a child's body build the cells, break down food into energy, fight infection, and carry oxygen. And again, these same things apply to adults as well. But it's just such an important conversation to have about making sure that we understand what it looks like to eat healthy so that we can be that example to our children, because it is so important for them so that they have the building blocks as they grow into adulthood. And foods that are good sources of protein, as you can imagine, are meats, poultry, fish, eggs, nuts, beans, and dairy products. If your kids are hesitant to eat the foods listed above, they can try some of these other things that have lesser amounts of protein, but they still have it. Crab or fish, type things. It lists crab cakes or Parmesan cheese. Obviously, any sort of cheese or yogurt or that type of thing is going to have some sort of protein in it. Quinoa has protein. It just isn't categorized as having more. So when you look at a food item, depending on which macronutrient is the most, that's how that food is categorized. So these particular foods that we're listing, they still have protein in them, but their number one amount of macronutrient isn't protein. So, like quinoa is going to have more carbohydrates than protein, but it's going to have a high number of protein. So quinoa is really good. It is a high protein grain, which is awesome. Then there's cottage cheese. Green peas have a lot of protein in them, but again, their first macronutrient or highest level is going to be carbs, but that's okay. Edamame, which is soybeans in the pods. And you can buy these in little bags frozen, where you can literally pop the bag into the microwave and steam it right in the bag. They can be in the shell or not. You can pop them out. You can get them organic, which is really important because a lot of soy products are GMO unless they're organic. And you just really don't want to be taking that into your body if you can help it. And then Brussels sprouts. And so trying to eat at least 2 portions of fish a week is a good goal if you're someone that eats fish. If you don't, then of course there's other ways. But the reason why we talk about fish is just because things such as salmon and mackerel, trout, and sardines are oily fishes that contain the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, which are really important for health. And we're going to go into the fat right now, but just want to throw that out because the fish falls under the protein category, because the highest macronutrient in fish is protein. The next category is fat, and fat is our most concentrated source of energy. So per molecule of fat that you get in your diet, it has the most energy in it. So you don't need as much fat in your diet. That's why we limit our fat, or we are aware of our fat intake. And healthy fats, there's nothing wrong with having them, and they're going to give you great energy. But you always want to be doing everything in harmony, in balance, because if you ate, your whole diet was just fat, you would be missing out on the other macronutrients. And so it provides double the amount of calories per gram. And fat is how our bodies store extra calories for later use. And fat is used in metabolic processes as part of hormones, and it insulates our bodies and provides shock absorption to protect different body parts. In our palms or our soles of our feet and around our internal organs, you have like little fatty pads, and they're there for protection. Our cell membranes are made of fat, and our brains are about 60% fat. And so some fats like omega-3s are essential, and we must get them from our diets. Fats are found in animal products, dairy, and oils from different plants like olives, avocados, canola seeds, or coconuts. In the healthy fat category, This is a great source of energy for everyone, kids and adults. And fats are essentially stored in the body, and they allow for proper usage of other important nutrients. So we need the fat for the other nutrients as well. And foods that contain high levels of healthy fats include whole milk dairy products. And again, only if you're drinking dairy. I'm not saying that you need to go out and do that. Cooking oils, and again, we'll go into detail about the types of cooking oils and what they all kind of look like. Meat, fish, and nuts. So I'm just giving some real quick abbreviations here because there's a lot of information for us to go over. And then we touched on a little bit about the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, which are the types of fats that are in oily fish, such as salmon, mackerel, trout, and sardines. And long-chain omega-3s are essential for normal brain development. And that's why this is so important that kids get it at an early age. But it's tough because not all kids necessarily want to eat fish, right? And so sometimes you have to be creative. But our bodies cannot make this type of fat, so it's important we can get it from the diet. Saturated fat that comes from animal products, such as fatty meats, butter, lard, and dairy products and foods made with these, such as cakes, biscuits, and pastries, and is where we want to be careful. And again, we kind of touched on that in the beginning. And so some fat is needed in the diet, but it needs to be the right type of fat and in the right amount. And the only reason why we even have to have this conversation is because we have so much access to foods in the grocery stores that are already processed and made for us. Because back, in the olden days when people made all of their own food, they were only using the fat that maybe came from the animals. So that would be a form of lard, but it would have been, they weren't overusing it. They were just using it so that they can make their, breads or biscuits or whatever it was. And now we just have access to a lot more of this food than our bodies can handle. And so that's why we have to look at it. We have to keep that balance so that we're not overdoing any one area. Too much saturated fat can increase the risk of your child developing serious health conditions in later life, such as heart disease. Because this always starts at a young age. Like any of these things, it's not like, people will say, yeah, it just happened overnight. But it's always been happening for a long time because the choices that we make, even from a young age, kind of create our body's makeup, right? Now, we can change it at any time. You can choose right now to change what you're inputting in, the fuel that you're inputting into your body, and it will change your cells. You will grow into a different person to where you don't have any of the issues that you would have either developed or that you already had. But we talk about this with kids because we don't want to set them up for having this kind of a situation later in life, such as heart disease. So if we can replace the saturated fats in your child's diet with unsaturated fats wherever possible, it will do them a big favor. And unsaturated fats, or examples, are olive oil, rapeseed, sunflower, and corn oils, oily fish, nuts, and seeds. Okay, next category is vitamins. So remember we talked about there's 6 macronutrients. So now we're on to not macronutrients, just nutrients. We just talked about the 3 macronutrients, which were fat was the very last one we did, and then we had protein and carbohydrates. Now we are switching over to the micronutrients, which is still one of the 6 nutrients, and the category is vitamins. So this is, although it's needed in a much smaller amount than the previous nutrients, the macronutrients, vitamins are essential for your body to function. So micro just means that we need less of it, but they're still vital. They're still super important. And each vitamin works as part of a different process in your body, helping make your metabolism, growth and development, or immune system work properly. Vitamins are classified as water soluble. So we got our B complex vitamins and vitamin C that are water soluble. And then we got vitamins that are fat soluble like A, D, E, and K. And so it's important to know the difference between these because water soluble vitamins, you'll pee right out if you ingest too many of them. But fat soluble will be stored in your fat. And so you don't ever want to overdose on even vitamins, especially the fat soluble ones. Vitamin A promotes growth, assists the eyes in adjusting to dim and bright lights, and it keeps the skin healthy. It works to prevent infection, and it does even more than that. Here are some foods that contain high levels of vitamin A. Carrots, sweet potatoes, squash, apricots, spinach, broccoli, fish oils, eggs, milk, and salmon. Vitamin A can be found in milk, yogurt, cheese, eggs, and orange, red and green leafy vegetables such as carrots, sweet potatoes, red peppers, and spinach. And for healthy skin and eyes, it helps with our eyes uh, dimming with the light. It also helps to keep the immune system healthy. Too much vitamin A can be harmful, again, because it's a fat-soluble vitamin. So you just want to make sure you're just taking the amount that you need and or getting it from foods. Because if you're eating these foods, you don't necessarily need to take a vitamin supplement. Those are just if you are short on those. And you can find that out by having your blood work done, and you can check your vitamin levels. Vitamin C does more than just fight off the common cold. It also holds the body's cells together. It strengthens the walls of blood vessels, heals wounds, and promotes strong bones and teeth. And the foods that contain high levels of vitamin C are citrus fruits, such as oranges and grapefruit, orange juice, strawberries, tomatoes, potatoes, bell peppers, broccoli, cauliflower, cantaloupe. Vitamin C can be found also in berries and peppers, Brussels sprouts, and for healthy body tissues, for example, skin, gums, bones, and teeth, as well as helping in the healing process, have a fruit bowl that is accessible to encourage your child to eat fruit. And maybe this is a good way for you to remember to eat fruit too, is to have it out. I always like to cut up different fruit that I had in season when my kids would have friends over, and that would be, a snack that they could have. And it seems like kids always loved having that available to them. Vitamin C also helps with the absorption of iron from plant sources. So having a drink or food containing vitamin C with an iron-rich meal is a good idea. For example, a glass of fruit juice with a bowl of iron-fortified cereal. That is just an example. There are many other food combinations, but if you understand that vitamin C helps iron absorb, you can kind of, be aware of that. Not only does vitamin D assist with calcium absorption, I'm sure you've heard of this, how that's really important, it also builds strong bones and teeth. What's more, vitamin D is necessary for many body processes such as blood pressure regulation, hormone production, and immune and nervous system function. And foods that contain vitamin D include fortified dairy products. Now, that's not one of my favorite ones as far as vitamin D is concerned because it's fortified, which means that it's a synthetic form of vitamin D, but sometimes that's what we got to do. So that's like milk and some yogurts. Fortified cereals, again, same category, it's being fortified. But things like fish and fish oil naturally have vitamin D in them. Eggs, again, fortified. Orange juice. I'm sure if you just squeeze the oranges, they would naturally have it and not need to be fortified with it. Mushrooms and pork. Vitamin D is important for growth, development, and maintenance of bones and teeth. It also helps to keep muscles and the immune system healthy. The main source of vitamin D is from the action of sunlight on the skin. Folate, one of the B vitamins, is also crucial for healthy growth and development of a child's cells. Again, important for adults as well, but because children are growing, super important for them. Lack of this vitamin can cause folate deficiency anemia. Foods that contain folate include lentils, chickpeas, berries, orange juice, asparagus, spinach, black or kidney beans, and Brussels sprouts. Okay, so we're on to the next category of nutrients, and it's minerals. So obviously, that wasn't every single vitamin that there is, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how you can get it from a lot of different foods. Now we're on to the minerals, and minerals are also part of food, and they're elements that are essential for our bodies to function. And some minerals are used for metabolic processes, and others are used as part of body structures, like calcium in our bones and teeth. Different foods contain different minerals. Calcium is essential for building a child's healthy bones and teeth. Again, just as healthy for adults, but necessary for kids. It's also important for blood clotting and nerve, muscle, and heart function. So you can see how calcium is going to be important for you as an adult too, because you can't say, well, I'm not building any more, bone. I'm the height I am. But you have a heart that needs to continue to function, and it needs calcium. And foods that contain calcium are milk, cheeses, yogurt, egg yolks, broccoli, spinach, tofu, calcium fortified orange juice. Again, we got the calcium fortified, and fortified plant-based milks, fortified cereals. You can tell those are not my favorite things. I pull this information, and I know it's true or available, and I like to give a wide range of possibilities for everyone in whatever situation that you're in. And all we can ever do is just do our best, do that much better, just do a little bit at a time. So I'm not trying to put that down in any way, but I always want to look at what else is there so that we don't feel like that is the answer. Um, I don't have scientific abilities to like test food, break it down, and really look at it. So we're kind of trusting those that have done it and put it on the labels. And we're not 100% sure how fortified things, since they're a synthetic vitamin, how our body will react, absorb, or take it. And so I just always like to know that what foods naturally have it. And that's kind of what I want to aim for. And that's why I feel like herbs are such a great thing, because they have so many vitamins, minerals, and nutrients in them that you can't get from other plants, or at least in that concentration. And so it's just a great way to um, fortify your body naturally. Iron is necessary to build healthy blood that carries oxygen to cells all over the body. It's also vital for growth and development, immune function, reproduction, and wound healing. What's more, having sufficient iron stores reduces the risk of anemia. So iron is one of the minerals, and foods that contain high levels of iron include red meats, poultry, especially the dark meat of poultry, shellfish, whole grains, beans, nuts, and again, iron fortified cereals. Irons in lean meats, liver, whole grain cereals, beans, nuts, sesame seeds, dark green leafy vegetables, dried fruit. And for healthy blood and for transporting oxygen around the body, we need this iron. Iron is especially important for teenage girls, as their requirements are higher due to menstrual losses. The next mineral is potassium, and potassium regulates several body functions, including heart rhythm, the nervous system, and muscle contraction. And that's why potassium is one of the electrolytes components. When you see, like, we'll talk more about that later, and I think I mentioned a little bit in the water podcast, but that electrolytes are really important. And it's because they are these essential minerals, and they help bind as well, but they help with all of these body functions. And so low levels of potassium can lead to muscle weakness and abnormal heart rate. Foods that contain potassium include sweet potatoes, orange juice, spinach, beans, prune juice, milk, yogurt, salmon, and bananas. And the most common nutrient deficiencies among school-age kids are in iron, magnesium, potassium, folate, fiber, and vitamin E. And vitamins that we want to make sure children are getting enough of for their growth are calcium, vitamin D, A, C, zinc, and B12. So I just like to mention this because often you're going to be an adult that's listening to this, and therefore you might have children, and so it might be of concern or interest to you. And understanding that there are a few signs of poor nutrition, especially in children, is things like being underweight or being overweight or obese, having constipation or changes in bowel habits, being pale or lethargic, and having tooth decay. And so some other symptoms of malnutrition can include like the appetite being reduced, lack of interest in food or drink, feeling tired all the time, feeling weaker, getting ill often. So being sick often, and taking a long time to recover from a sickness or an injury. Wounds that take a long time to heal, poor concentration, and feeling cold most of the time. So I just wanted to touch on that. So it's something that you can look at if you have children or have children in your lives, and notice some of these symptoms, because us getting the nutrients we need, these 6 vital nutrients in our life, water, fat, protein, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals, are the things that help our body grow. And without them, we will have something that will not function properly, and we're going to see the results of that over time. So thanks for listening today. I hope that you learned something about nutrients and the importance of these 6 elements. I look forward to going into each one of them into more depth, so that can be helpful to you and how you can get these nutrients into your life more on a regular basis now that you're aware of it. And that's the best thing we can do for ourselves, is to have education, to understand, to learn, to have that knowledge, and then we can apply it in our lives as we feel is right for for us and our families.
To be your healthiest self, join me each week as we talk about a new topic that can help you, your family, and your loved ones in your life to be your healthiest self.